Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and I am joined, as always, Best Bets Pod, Recap Pod, Brandon Anderson. He's in his Vikings jersey today, which is kind of looking forward to the game that we are going to preview at the end of this podcast. But first, Brandon, what's up? How are you? Happy Sunday night.
I mean, happy Super Wildcard weekend. Happy we finally got a fun game to talk about at the end of the day on Sunday. It took us 4 games to get there. It's feeling a little college football playoff for a while. We all complained about all those blowouts. We got a lot of blowouts here. We'll talk about them, but we talked about it Thursday, Friday, about the margin of victory in this opening round has been pretty high, and we saw a lot of those here. So I think it's interesting to say, okay, what did we learn from these games? Were the blowouts actually blowouts? Did some teams win by less impressively than it looked, or even more impressively than it looked? And then how things set up going forward. So fun weekend, lots of football. We still get one more tomorrow night, and then we get to do it all again next weekend. We're just getting started here.
Yeah, I mean, just getting started, but also to the fact we've had 5 games. You've had, I believe, 4 unders. So it's been pretty, a little mundane. The favorites have been winning aside from the game we're going to talk about right now, which was also the closest margin of victory by far. It was the best game, definitely not the best performance of the weekend, but definitely probably the best game, which is Washington wins Sunday Night Football, 23-20 as 3-point underdogs, against the Bucs on the road. Total goes under 51.5. Again, closest game of the weekend. We had a margin issue prior to this game starting. And then, honestly, I thought we were going to get overtime. And a few people had betted as well in our Discord, but didn't actually ended up getting there. And everyone was talking about it, but it's the DC doink is probably the way that this has to be labeled going forward. But field goal goes in at the end. But before you even get to that point, the thing that was pretty intriguing to me is just how composed and really just efficient Jaden Daniels was the entire night. I mean, even early, first 2 drives, he was 7 of 7 against zone coverage, 82 yards and a touchdown. And then it's Baker Mayfield on the other side with the big runs early on. Really, he led them in rushing at the end of the first half. And, end of the first half, it is 10-10. And the stars doing much better than the second and third wide receivers, McLaurin and Evans having big days. But I'll give you a few stats in terms of how this game ended. But before we talk about the rest of the NFC in like a few minutes, what did you think of Tampa Bay and Washington?
Yeah, I mean, this was the game we thought would be pretty fun and back and forth, and it sort of feels like what we got. Like, I wish maybe in the future years, I know they're not going to do it, but we have like the Texans Saturday afternoon game. Why isn't this the Saturday afternoon game? Like, we all knew this was going to be more fun. Why don't they give us this at the start of the week to just kind of like get the juices flowing a little bit? Just
they want us to remember the good. They want us to remember the good games at the end of the weekend.
I realize it's Sunday night and we're all watching. We're waiting all day for Sunday night. I'm just giving Roger Goodell some tips. I'm sure he's listening right now. Washington, I thought, really had control of the game the first half. It felt like they had the ball the entire second quarter. And then, Baker had that, I think, an 18-yard run. It's like bouncing off of dudes. We've seen him do that down the stretch here. You and I talked about the Bucs, I think like 2 months ago, as 7-1 division underdogs, and they came through and really made a run late. We saw Baker take off and make plays with his legs. He talked about in the broadcast, or they talked about him saying how he knows when his team kind of needs a lift. He's got to just go do, full Baker, basically, like run, go crazy, fire the team up. I thought, honestly, especially since we knew the Bucs are more of a second half team, when they stole that touchdown to get it to 10-10 at halftime, I thought they stole the game. I thought the Bucs at home would have settled in and get there. Washington this season lived on the outliers on fourth down. I think there was something like 20 of 23 for the season, just an absurd conversion rate.
Yeah.
Their EPAs and all their different stats on late downs were just crazy all year. So what happens? Stats are a real dick sometimes. So they get into the red zone early in the game. They turn it over on fourth down on about the 20. Then later in the game, they get in the red zone again. They get down to the 3. They get stopped again. I'm going crazy because I got the Jane Daniels escalator and all the different rushing stuff. Move him around, man. Get out of the pocket. Let him use his legs. On all these red zone plays, he's just standing in the pocket looking to make a throw and not finding guys open. But finally, they get stopped again. But why do you go for it on fourth down so close to the goal line? In part, because if you don't get it, you might get a stop and get the ball back in a pretty good position. And they got a little help here. Tampa Bay, a couple plays later, fumbles the snap. That's the big swing. Washington gets it back, gets to fourth down again. And finally, this time, they convert on fourth down. Another pocket pass for the touchdown. Then Tampa, the other kind of bobble that really got them is they get down, they're driving right after that to either tie or retake the lead. They had like 3rd and inches, and I think they just got the snap count wrong. The center snaps the ball before anyone else, including Baker, knew was coming. And so 3rd and inches turns into like a loss of 3 or 4, where it should have been a first down in the red zone, chance to bleed the clock a little more, chance to maybe get a touchdown and the lead. Instead, they settle for the field goal. It's a tie game. And you know what happens from there? Washington did what they did the whole game. They just bled the clock out. They just went on these long drives, and just very clearly, like you said, Jane Daniels was the best player on the field by a wide margin, totally in control of the game, got them down the field, got the big run when they needed to basically bleed the clock out to the end. And then, man, the DC doink, is that what we're calling it? It's crazy field goal for the win.
My only 2 notes here before I get into some crazy stats from this one is Tampa Bay's 1st and goal on the 1. Incomplete pass to Bates. Brian Robinson minus 2-yard rush. Incompletion to Brian Robinson, which I have no idea why they were throwing to Robinson so much in the game when they ended up throwing to Eckler at the end and it worked out so well. And then incompletion over the middle. So it was the Tampa Bay 1st and goal from the 1 that I felt like didn't turn into the touchdown that kind of cost them. And then vintage Mike Evans 3rd down stretch that ends up giving them the first down, and then they blow it the next play. So to me, those were probably the 2 points in the game that ended up swinging it. The stat that I just put out, which is incredible. So 2 quarterbacks have engineered an offense on the road in the playoffs with 0 punts and 0 turnovers. And this could be my big stat of the day, but it's 2024 Jaden Daniels in this game tonight, and then 2003 Peyton Manning. So only 2 quarterbacks to ever do that. Only 3 teams have ever had 0 punts and 0 turnovers in the game, and 03 Manning would be the one that did it on the road. So, I mean, just in terms of rookies on the road in the playoffs, Jaden Daniels, Russell Wilson, Mark Sanchez, Joe Flacco, but Jaden Daniels looked great tonight. Composed all around, and like I talked about earlier, great against that zone early in the game. He really did his job against Tampa Bay's defense. And Brian Robinson, I don't know what he ended with. He had like 10 rushes and 16 yards before I typed into our Discord, what the heck are we doing here? But that's kind of my thought process. We'll go forward and talk about how this result, Washington and the Lions, in a little bit. But anything else in this game?
Yeah, neither team really ran the ball much. So it just came down to the passing. And honestly, I didn't think the Bucs offense was all that bad. They just couldn't get on the field. They only ran 44 plays to 69 for Washington, 25 more plays, 60% of the possession. I thought the Bucs moved the ball just fine. But all that said, Washington really should have won more comfortably. They were 2 of 5 in the red zone because they had those 2 turnover and downs. Otherwise, they probably win even more comfortably. Washington, 8 of 15 on 3rd down, 3 of 5 on 4th down. That is a lot of completions and a lot of attempts. 5 4th down attempts in this game. And look, their aggression got rewarded. Maybe Dan Campbell, or maybe Dan Quinn is the new Dan Campbell here with how aggressive that they were going. We'll talk about the matchup next, but I think the way Jaden Daniels is playing, definitely dangerous. Washington in Detroit, they're going to put up some points. This offense is going to score some points. The way McDaniels is playing, or Daniels and McLaurin are playing, I think that they are very live to at least turn that into a shootout as we expect. And then the last note I had, I tweeted this out. I know you know this. Washington's first playoff win since 2005. Here's the stats from that game. Mark Brunell is the winning quarterback in that game. That's how long ago this has been. He completed 7 passes out of 15 for 41 yards in the win against who? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So here we are 20 years later. Washington, you're in the 2nd round. So it should be a fun one. I got to say, if you at the beginning of the season said, okay, let's name the 8 teams that were going to be down to the final 8 in the NFL, I might have gotten like 25 teams in before I got to Washington. And that might still be generous, to be honest. Like, I did not give this team any shot to get here. And I think you got to give most of the credit to Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm giving it to Dan Quinn. Everyone was yelling and screaming early in the game when he didn't go for two, when they got the penalty
Yeah,
moved to the 1
it was
yard
rough.
line. I have just a gut feeling that if Washington keeps advancing, you're going to be giving the credit to Daniels. And if the decision comes up to Quinn at some point in the game, you're probably going to see Washington going
Yeah,
home. All right, Green Bay and Philly. So Philly ends up winning the game 22-10 as a 5.5 point favorite on close. And the total went under. I didn't even see what the close on the under was. Let's see. Total was under 46. So really not too much of a sweat there. And listen, Green Bay opens the game with a fumble on the opening kickoff. And then you get a Barkley long run, Hurts to Dotson, and before you really even sat down with your popcorn or your sandwich, it was 7-0 off the bat. And
yeah,
at that point, you kind of said to yourself, when's Green Bay going to turn on, right? Like 6 first half drives, fumble, punt, interception, missed field goal, interception, but down just 10-0. So going into the half, Green Bay does absolutely zero. Everyone is basically hurt for them. So Dobbs goes
yeah,
down, Reed goes down, John Myers, Josh Jacobs ends up actually getting injured and coming back into the game, Quay Walker, and then the big one, Jenkins, the
yeah.
guard, which ends up being like an absolute issue for them the entire game, as it does feel like that the Eagles pass rush ends up, at least pressuring Love, where he ends up having 3 interceptions in the game. I mean, honestly, it's a weird game to say Green Bay obviously messed up a ton, but I don't leave the game feeling amazing about the Eagles. I
No,
mean, Saquon Barkley most of the night gets bottled up. I think his longest run was 17 yards. So he's really, not getting into that second level a ton. Now, obviously, I think he would have gotten all the way to the end zone at the end of the game there. So
sure.
maybe a bit of an asterisk. But I mean, most of the night, he's bottled up in this one. They don't find A.J. Brown almost at all. I think it was 1 reception, 1 book read in this one. So, I mean, Devonta Smith gets his targets, but to me, it just didn't feel great. And Philly 1-4 in the red zone, and obviously you're going to get the Vikings and Rams now in their next game. So I think if you're Philly, you probably want to see the Rams, and you probably don't want to see the Vikings, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that because do you rather face Matthew Stafford or Sam Darnold? I know there are 21 other guys starting on the game too, but Sam Darnold on the road in Philly in that environment against this defense,
I guess that's
I feel
fair.
like if I'm the Eagles, I feel pretty good about that. I say in my Vikings jersey, but I don't know. It's interesting. Certainly, the Rams' defense is more gettable, and I
Yeah,
think to come back to this game, I don't feel great about Philadelphia's offense from what I saw in this game. I had it in my notes
agreed.
that I don't think that this is a championship offense right now. I bet NFC futures for Philadelphia. The reason I didn't want to bet them in the Super Bowl is because I didn't know if I believed in Jalen Hurts when we got there. I really don't see that based on this game. Hurts was terrible in this game, I thought. The stats aren't so bad, but like, look, Jordan Love, 3 interceptions. Clearly a bad game. Inaccurate all game, overthrowing some guys. His very first pass, he almost gets picked off. Jordan Love was not good this game. Jordan Love may not be healthy. Jalen Hurts may not be healthy. But we knew that coming in, that both of them would be a little rusty and shaky. I honestly thought Jalen Hurts might have had a worse game than Jordan Love by the eye test. Like, not really, because he threw 2 touchdowns. Love had none plus 3 interceptions. So, like, that's just enough on its own to swing it. Hurts was not good. Hurts did not look good getting this game. A.J. Brown, 3 targets, 1 catch. The most we saw of A.J. Brown all day was him reading a book on the sideline. Like, literally, that's how uninvolved in the game that he was. He's reading a book during the game as Green Bay has the ball. Just very weird process. Uh, I was on Devontae and Jaden Reed. We hit that. They both led their team in receptions. Devontae led the game in receiving yards. Reed probably would have, but went out hurt. We did get some fun nasty boy football. Dallas Goedert with the triple stiff arm touchdown. That was the one that kind of blew the game open to get to 16-3. Poor Carrington Valentine, I think he has to retire after that one. Like, Goddard gave him the stiff arm to get a little room, gave him one more to get in, and I think the third one was just for fun. I think he was just like, you know what? I'm already good now, but let me just give you one more on the way out for the touchdown. And then right after that, Josh Jacobs has like a nasty boy run through like 4 or 5 defenders. Rule of cool, just leave that be a touchdown. They're getting in anyways. Like, come on, that play deserved to be a touchdown. Jacobs was really the only offense for Green Bay. He had 18 for 81, 3 catches, 40 yards. They just didn't do much. But if you look at the offensive numbers, the Eagles, not the Packers, had worse offensive numbers. The Eagles had a 34% success rate. 1 in 3 of their plays were successful. And we talked about the Packers. Was their defense for real? Would it hold up? I thought it held up. You look at the stats, everything is basically even all the way across the board. First downs off by 1, even time of possession, even on yardage. The Packers led in yardage and first downs by just a play, basically. They're better on third downs by a lot. Philadelphia was 2 of 11 on third down. The problem is 4 turnovers to none. That's it. 4 turnovers to none, you're not winning the playoff game on the road. It's not happening. So you can't just, all the rest doesn't matter when you turn over that much. I get it. But yeah, I don't come away, 2 things. I don't come away saying, we were wrong about the Packers. They were terrible this year. What a bad read. The Packers had nobody left on offense. Everyone was injured. They still played them statistically pretty even. You can't turn over 4 times and win. You're just not going to do that. But football is a weird game. The ball is oblong. It's going to give you some bad bounces sometimes. Honestly, that opening kickoff, Keyshawn Nixon, we all watched it. He recovered the ball. They had the ball. We all saw him have the ball. I don't know what the refs are doing on that one. It was a very weird way to start the game. And look, all year long, what's Philadelphia's thing, Ben? Can't score in the first quarter. The one thing you couldn't do if you're Green Bay is gift them 7 out of the gates on the road. Hey, you got the lead, run the ball and play your style. That's like the worst possible outcome. Our old colleague, Raheem Palmer, over at The Ringer now, has been saying for weeks, I think it's just not the Packers' year. And I don't buy into that stuff. I don't buy into isn't their year. It's not the Packers' year. It just wasn't the Packers' year. And this was the game that wasn't the Packers' game. Because how are you going to explain away fumbling the open kickoff, multiple interceptions, all the injuries, multiple pretty weak penalty calls where I think they got the crowd talked them into like a late hit or something that's like, okay, we're giving 15 yards for that now. I think this is a game where the Packers played them well enough, but not well enough because of the turnovers. It's a game for me that I feel like I'm going to downgrade the Eagles a little bit after this. I do not feel good about Jalen Hurts or the offense.
Yeah, I think it's the passing game for me that just feels very inconsistent. Like Hurts scrambles, Barkley finds his lanes, even if it wasn't a long one, and they contained him a little bit in this game. But to me, that was it. I was very confused with the inconsistency there from Hurts. And I think he had 39 yards passing in the first half, and it got a little bit better in the second half, finding Devontae, but that is just not, if their goal is Detroit, which we can talk about in a second, that is just not even going to be close enough to beat them in one of those types of games, especially if the game's got to be in Detroit. Okay, so the NFC bracket, and we can talk about that right now since it is set for the divisional round. You've got Washington at Detroit. Right now, as we're speaking, Sunday night, Detroit is an 8.5 point favorite at home. The total is 55.5. I did see a 56, but it looks like, I think it opened 54.5, up to 56, back down to 55.5. Now, at 55.5, it would be the largest total since Chiefs Browns in 2021 closed 55.5. And if it gets to 56, then it's Chiefs Patriots 2019 Brady Mahomes, which would be a fun note in itself. I haven't looked this up. I could do it quickly, but I'm pretty sure with these high totals, unders tend to be the advantage play a little bit there, as teams are a bit tighter. Now, this one in Detroit, obviously in the dome, faster, play there a little bit, especially trying to keep up with Detroit. I mean, initial look for me, 8.5 feels a little high, especially if Jaden Daniels is going to get 10 to 12 carries in the game. I think the game they could try to slow it down a little bit. I mean, I kind of like Washington walking into this playoff stretch a little bit. I think they're a little underrated, and their defense did well tonight. They really held Baker in some form, only 20 points in the game. So I would kind of lean Washington and at least keep it close. So what's your first instinct here, Washington-Detroit?
Yeah, so first instinct, the first thing I start with this round is that the trends in the wild card round are to back the big home favorites. We did that with Buffalo. We did that with Baltimore. We saw those teams come through. The trends in the division round, the one we're going to, is to fade the big home favorites, especially the teams coming off the bye week, especially the
Yeah.
1 seed. So that is going to be the trend here. Detroit is 6-2 against playoff teams, but 6 of those 8 games were close games. So I think there is definitely potential for Detroit to win a close game and or Detroit to leave the back door open, even in a game where they're relatively comfortably in it because of the defense. So I think the big question here is, if you look at the numbers from season long, then that's where I start always. And I say, okay, what's the weak link in the game? Oh, easy. Washington's defense. Clearly the weak link in the game. Ben Johnson, Detroit will get anything they want. And look, I think they should be able to get a lot because Washington, middle of the field, is very near the bottom of the league. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown should carve them up and have a big game. Definitely be looking for props for him, for Goff. I think that makes sense. However, if you look at stats from just the last 6 weeks of games to close the season, Washington finished 10th in DVOA defensively during that stretch. Detroit was bottom 5. So I'm going to ask myself, and we're going to have to figure it out this week, are we sure that Washington's defense is the bad unit, not Detroit's defense? Because that's not what we have seen on the field. And look, Washington, before tonight, had only faced 3 offenses in the top 10 all season long, and they were terrible. They gave 33 points a game in those games, but tonight they held the Bucs to only 20. Now, not really that spectacular defensively, mostly because the offense was so good they stayed on the field, but guess what? That works. If they could do that in Detroit, what better way to take the crowd out of it than to just go chew up the clock, play Detroit ball, basically, and go on these long drives. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to lean Washington initially over a touchdown. My number is pretty similar to this. I have Detroit by about 8 or 9, but, the numbers don't always tell the whole story here. I think, too, some props that I'll definitely be looking for. I mentioned Amon-Ra, Jared Goff, I think should be able to get some stuff there. Jaden Daniels, rushing escalator again. I know we just whiffed on all of it today, but he was close. He had 13 carries. We were 14-1 on 15 carries. Detroit has been bottom 5 against fantasy points to quarterbacks, and a lot of that's been rushing. So Aaron Glenn, we saw last year in the playoffs, especially outmanned. What he does is brings pressure a lot. So it's going to be the exact same case with Todd Bowles. Bring pressure. How is he going to react to pressure? Daniels is probably going to run again. So I think I'll look for that. Detroit is also bottom 5 against running back receptions. If you watch the game tonight, they could not stop talking about Austin Eckler and how important he was. And I think having him out there for blitz protection and for some catches, maybe some Eckler receiving overs as well. So that's what I got my eye on early, but a lot of fun stuff for this one. I think definitely this will be the shootout of the week next weekend.
Yeah, for anybody watching on video right now, I'm laughing as well because I was literally going to say versus number 1 wide receivers, number 2 wide receivers, number 3 wide receivers, and tight ends. Detroit is basically top 10, maybe even top 7 DVOA. Against running backs is where they show some weakness. And I think it's honestly just the fact that they lead so many times in games that there just becomes an opportunity there. Now,
Yeah.
Robinson tonight had a lot of looks in the receiving game, which I was a little shocked by. I mean, a healthy Eckler. I mean, this is exactly why you brought him here. Now, you saw some of it at the end there. Maybe they learn a little bit, but I also think you're 100% right on Daniels and rushing. I almost would say, and I think you played this, but the rushing attempts, all like next game, I would not be shocked to have him like get 15 carries in the game or something like that. Because even tonight, Robinson was 10 of 16 at last look in the fourth quarter. Like they just need to figure out something else. And I think all that pressure from Glenn could make Daniels kind of get upfield a little bit more. I know Minnesota and the Rams against the Eagles, we don't really have a situation, we don't really know the matchup yet, being recorded before Monday Night Football, but just any thoughts on the matchups either way or the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially just what I said earlier, I think if you're Philadelphia, the defense is the identity right now. The defense and running the football. And I think if that's my identity, and I don't necessarily want to have my quarterback go head to head, I don't know if I want Jalen Hurts against Matthew Stafford right now. Stafford, I don't think he's quite as good as a lot of folks make him out to be. He's inconsistent, but Stafford definitely has the higher ceiling, and I don't think you want that smoke if you're Philadelphia and you have the chance of Stafford and Puka and Cooper Kupp. And now look, obviously you got Justin Jefferson on the other side, but Jefferson has not done well against the Eagles. The Vikings have not done well against the Eagles. I can tell you that as a Vikings fan without looking it up. So I don't know. Philadelphia fans, they would probably like Minnesota because there's some recent history there. But I think matchup wise for the Eagles, their defense against road Sam Darnold, I think you look like Minnesota's a defensive identity as well. But the Eagles' defense has been better than Minnesota's down the stretch, and the offenses are somewhat inconsistent. I think your advantage Eagles. Philadelphia playing the Rams, that's a little more up in the air just because you never know what sort of game Stafford might have on you. And now I think the advantage there is the Eagles' offense against the Rams' defense. But if I'm Philly, I'd rather just get my bread and butter. I want to stick with the defense and the running. I don't want to have it say, okay, great, Jalen Hurts will just pass all over everyone. I don't know if I want to put my money on Jalen Hurts passing all over everyone. Maybe he can get it to the receivers I trust, but he's going to have to get it to them. So I think if it's Eagles Vikings, I will probably feel better about the Eagles just kind of taking care of business as the home favorite with the better defense right now. This Eagles Rams feels a little bit more volatile to me because you just might not have the better quarterback there.
Yeah, I mean, I think after the performance today, I think I'm a little shaky about both opponents. Like either team with a little momentum off of a win tomorrow night, even though would it be short rest? It would be, right? Yeah, either way,
Yeah.
it's going to be a little bit of
Yeah.
short rest. But to me, I think Minnesota, if you took any other quarterback, competent or not, Darnold had a fantastic season, but
For sure.
no one's going to forget who he was in the past. And you put another quarterback on that team with what you've seen. I think Minnesota is as scary as it comes, especially with the blitz and Flores and the I would say positive coaching decisions by O'Connell. I think over some of the decisions we've seen and some of the clock management stuff, he's really good in one score games. Like I don't know if I necessarily want to see Minnesota off of a win and some confidence.
Sure.
Like Darnold is their weakness, but off of a win in a neutral site game against an experienced Rams team, I think both opponents I'm going to like against Philly based off of what I've seen this week. And I just wanted to see more in the passing game, and we just didn't really see it. All right.
Let me ask you one question before we move on to the AFC.
Please.
So Philly looks vulnerable based on what we saw today. Detroit looked vulnerable for the last month down the stretch. If I told you right now, tomorrow is the Super Bowl, Evan, Detroit and Philly both didn't make it here. You got 3 choices left. Who came out of the NFC?
Oh, it's Washington.
That's my instinct too. That Washington, Jaden Daniels being that dude, being the best quarterback in the conference, putting up points in Detroit, and then winning maybe in Philly, where we just saw him win a couple, weeks ago. It's crazy to say that, but Washington is my instinct too.
38-35 in Detroit, and then nobody stops talking about him and all this different type of stuff. I think there's just an underrated aspect of the team. I also think there's veterans on the team. Like I do think like an Austin Eckler really does help. I mean, he's been through a ton and he's going to become more of the offense every week. And again, we talked about the weaknesses with Detroit. I don't know, but I think Washington would be the team with the shot. All right. One big stat before we go into the AFC. I just want to talk about Washington's win tonight. So favorites in night games this season were 48-12 straight up, 80% this season. Best mark of any year since 1971. And then obviously Washington comes and kind of blows it out the window, but only the 13th underdog to win in a night game this year. And ironically enough, obviously did the Lions 6-0 as favorites in night games this year. And they will be in a night game against Washington next week. So Washington has the opportunity to win back-to-back games here. But honestly, that stat I gave earlier on Jaden and Peyton could have been my stat of the day as well, because that was pretty ridiculous. Okay, AFC time. Chargers, Texans. So Texans win this game 32-12, even tough to say. I believe it was a scoregami as well, which is very exciting. 2.5-point underdogs, Houston in the close there. Total goes over 41. Under. Or was it? No, I guess it was the over. Over 41.5. So this game started to me, and it exactly felt like a 3:30 p.m. Saturday game. It was just every Houston playoff game I can ever imagine, and they always play in this slot, which is the funny thing we've been talking about all week. But we saw 6 punts, 2 field goals, 2 interceptions, and a fumble before we saw the first touchdown of the playoffs. And it was absolutely terrible from all fronts. And that's why you were saying, why didn't we get this damn Tampa Washington game in that slot? I can understand it. But 7 total turnovers in the game. I mean, 10 penalties and 8 were on Houston. So no matter who was going to end up winning this game after a while, I think we weren't going to feel great about them, considering the circumstances. I don't think either team, played well, but Herbert does end up throwing 4 interceptions, 3 of 12 on third down and fourth down, and his average depth of target being almost 13 yards. At some point, they're trailing in the game, and he's just literally chucking it downfield. 2 of 8 passing on 15 plus yards downfield. Throws the touchdown to Ladd, but has 2 interceptions. Talked about 03 Peyton Manning, but Herbert becomes the first quarterback with 4 plus picks and 4 plus sacks with 14 points or less since Peyton in 2004. So this was just overall a terrible experience. That was 6-0 Chargers for what felt like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But what was your feeling on Houston and the Chargers? Then we could talk about Houston going forward.
Yeah, I mean, this was a lot of what we saw in other games the Chargers played this year against playoff teams, where they came out, looked pretty good, felt in control somewhat early, but didn't put it away, and then the other teams came back. That's the 6-0 easily could have been 10-0 or 14-0, but they left some points on the table.
Very true.
And all of a sudden, you get that drive right before halftime. The Texans go on a 13-play, 99-yard touchdown drive. I thought should have been a safety that they didn't call a penalty on a throwaway. And then you have the play where CJ Stroud basically dribbles the snap, recovers it, and then throws a 34-yard pass. And suddenly they're kicking and they get down the field, they get the touchdown. Then a little bit later, Stroud has a long scramble. He never runs, and he gets a long scramble into a field goal. And suddenly it's 10-6 at the half. And you're like, what just happened? The Chargers were dominating this entire half. The other thing to me, the big story from a betting standpoint, I thought was the total, because we gave out the total under 44.5 on the hot read. That total kept dropping. I think I had it at 42.5 close, but somewhere in that range. Now here's where it went wonky. It looked under all the way, clearly an under game is the right decision there. But you get the late touchdown you get a pick six through McConkey's hands, a guy that's been just nails catching the ball all year. That's not Herbert's fault. 2 of the interceptions were off his receiver's hands. Then later, you get kind of a broken play McConkey touchdown, a long one, but then they block the extra point. Dicker, the kicker, just bats it down like he's a quarterback. That's not a thing. And it gets returned for 2 points. Well, those 2 points swung the entire total in this game. And if you bet the under late in the week or at the close, that is a brutal beat for you. And it goes over on that one. So I think from a betting standpoint, that was the crazy part. I had my notes on Herbert. McConkey, 9 catches, 197 yards. Other than him, the other rest of the Chargers team, 5 receptions from Herbert. Texans, 4 receptions from Herbert. Not a great ratio that you want there for Herbert. I didn't come away feeling super impressed from Houston watching, but by the stats, 429 yards to 261 yards. If I hadn't watched the game, 4 turnovers plus practically double the yardage or close to it, that's a pretty dominant sort of performance. But Texans, 39% success rate, not really that great. Chargers were 34%. Just a lot of defense in this game and a lot of Saturday afternoon in this game. It felt like it swung on late down plays. Houston was 0.66 EPA per play on 16 late down plays. That's really the only spot they found some offense all game. And just kind of some fluky stuff, honestly. They got the right bounces. It's hard to call it a fluke when you win by 20. I think the right team won this game pretty clearly. But I don't know that I'm necessarily thrilled about Houston going forward. But we'll get there when we talk about Houston versus Kansas City. They're going to be an interesting underdog in that matchup.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the focus should be solely on Houston here for a second. Stroud does now, I guess, have a tiny bit of playoff experience. Winning a playoff game in each of his first 2 seasons. You like some of that having to go to Kansas City at this point, because this is going to be a completely different animal, especially against, I tend to fade the teams off of the buys, which is why I kind of like the Washington-Detroit situation. But there's just something in there that makes me think that this Houston-KC situation could be a little bit different. I just wish Houston had a little bit more. the Tank Dell thing to me just means so much when there just isn't a second option. And, Nico played great in this game. And I think the final score, like you said, just wasn't indicative of what the play was overall. And listen, the first half, Joe Mixon, and second half, Joe Mixon, actually kind of looked like two completely different running backs. He really felt like he got his groove there. And in the first half, I was saying to myself, well, this is the same guy we've seen over the last 5 weeks, which hasn't been great, a little bit up and down. But if Houston's going to win that other game against Kansas City, it's going to be about their defense. I mean, Herbert was 3 of 11 passing outside the numbers. Really struggled in this one, which they're going to have to do that against Kansas City and try to force them down the middle, which is going to be Kelsey. But at least you know who they're going to, because at this point, Casey has way more options than I think they've had in recent years. The other thing with Houston, 14-4 first half ATS now. As they did win the first half, coming back down 6-0. 26-9 first half ATS with CJ Stroud. So really starting fast, which with that defense putting a lot of pressure on other teams. To me, Houston had the most impressive performance of the weekend. And that's probably saying a lot about what Jaden Daniels did tonight. But in the end, they really held down a Chargers team. So not much else to say about that. Anything else there?
Yeah, I think just we're kind of on the Houston, Kansas City thing. So I think just to kind of wrap up our preview-ish for that, for me too, I can tell you right now, this is going to be the trend spot of the week. When all my trends pop up, every one of them is going to tell me I have to take the Texans here. Like, I'm already dreading seeing them all because we know I've talked about this team all season long. However, 2 key matchups here that I think are going to really be in Houston's favor and give the Texans a shot. Number one, what's the best thing on Houston? It's either Nico Collins or it's the pass rush. Both of those are big problems. The pass rush from the edge, Kansas City's weak spot on the offense has been their tackles all season. Now, does Tooney stay over at tackle? Do they move him back inside now that they're a little bit healthier? That's a big question. And both tackles, even Jamar Taylor, has not been good at right tackle this year, even though he's been out there. So that, to me, can change a whole game in a hurry. We've seen Mahomes and the rare playoff losses. It's usually when he's under pressure and can't get the ball away. On the other side, the Chiefs' defense, though it's been better lately, for the entire season is bottom 10 against wide receiver 1 by DVOA. So that was something we liked about the Chargers in the matchup, is that they were good against wide receiver 1s. I think Nico can eat a little bit. I don't think the Chiefs have that shutdown cornerback now that L'Jarius Sneed is not on the roster anymore. They've been a good pass defense, but if I'm the Texans and I can get Nico going a little bit and I can get the edge rushers coming a little bit, maybe I might have a chance there. And we know Houston is early in the game. Maybe I only end up just taking a first half ATS Houston, but all the trends, and we'll get back to them when we get to our picks later in the week, they're going to be staring at me in the face, begging me to believe in Houston this week. And that's going to be probably my toughest decision of the week.
Yeah, it looks like right now, just talking about that line, was 8.5. It's now moved down to 8 as of deep into Sunday night, turning into Monday morning. The interesting thing is, well, first half line, God, I wish it was 6. Right now it is 5.5. And honestly, the line moving the other way, 5.5 might be disappearing as well. But that is the situation with that one. Go.
I think it could getting back the other way. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get a read on. Will the sentiment be, man, these Chiefs have been overrated, they're there for the picking? Or will it be, come on, man, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, inevitable? Because right in that range, like, it's not going to stick there. It's going to move one way or the other. And I just think, what book out there wants to give you Chiefs over under a field goal on a teaser? Because everyone knows that what's going to happen in this game is the Chiefs just win by 3 in the end. Like, this is the game we've watched 8 times already this season. I think it's going to get higher because of teaser protection, but maybe I'm overreaching on the teaser stuff.
Well, yeah, listen, it's definitely not 7.
No,
so,
for sure.
I mean, if it's 7.5, like, yeah, but right now sitting at 8, so we'll see. All right, let's keep rolling here. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. So Baltimore wins this game 28-14. And I honestly, just saying this Sunday night, this feels like 12 years ago after all these games. But 28-14 as a 9.5 point favorite. Total goes under 44.5. The really only big point that we need to talk about in this game was probably the rushing game. And it was very simple. So 4 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards. Those are the first three running back plays for Pittsburgh in this game. They go 4 yards, 4 yards, and 3 yards. Not terrible. Pittsburgh, 4 first half drives, all punts, all third downs, ending with the ball in Russ's hands that turn into incompletions. Pittsburgh ends the game with just 11 carries for 29 yards after honestly starting the game okay, but Russ, third down, incompletion, punt turned into what Baltimore had. Baltimore ends the game with 50 carries for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns. Baltimore ends up having 16 rush first downs, while Pittsburgh had 2. So, I mean, we talked about Zay Flowers and we talked about the impact there, but we didn't even allow Zay Flowers to have any impact on the game because it just didn't matter because he didn't throw to wide receivers at all. And it's not that he's not going to throw to Lamar's not going to throw to wide receivers next week. It's just the fact that it didn't matter in this game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I believe his targets to players in this game was basically 4 to Likely, 4 to Justice Hill, and then after that it was 3 to Mark Andrews. Like, wide receivers didn't even get looked at. So to me, I don't necessarily want to say you throw this out the window, but the way Baltimore decided to play against Pittsburgh, I think the question should be, are they going to play that same way against Buffalo? Like, are we going to expect Derrick Henry and Justice Hill and Lamar Jackson to basically just carry the ball 50 times and that's the way they're going to try to beat Buffalo? Because they definitely made the decision that this was the way they were going to beat Pittsburgh. And honestly, when you look at the 2 games they played against Pittsburgh this year, one game they were like, yeah, we're going to give this ball to Derrick Henry. The other game they were like, we're not. So obviously they figured something out that worked, but I think that's the interesting question is how they play next week against Buffalo.
Yeah, and I think I guess maybe because I'm more of an optimist on Baltimore right now, but to me, I think that that's not necessarily like, okay, hard to take away too much. You can't just have no receivers. Basically, like they weren't not throwing to receivers. They weren't on the field. They were just running up and pounding the ball on guys. To me, the takeaway optimistically is versatility and the ability to just do that if you can. And no, you know what? Why even risk anything going wrong passing the ball? We don't need to. We're just going to run on you anyway. And like, frankly, I'm kind of pissed that they did because they screwed up all my escalators. It's 21-0 at the halftime. I'm thinking like, okay, great. We're going to win by like 50. We're going to hit every escalator all the way up. We had nothing. I like crushed exactly what we thought was going to happen in this game. Here's the half, 21-0, 19 first downs to 2 for Baltimore. Henry has 100 yards already. Baltimore has 308 yards to 59 for Pittsburgh, including Baltimore had a 13-play, 85-yard drive with only runs. They only that is what you do on video games to embarrass your like biggest enemy is just run the ball 13 times in a row and get a touchdown. That's what they were doing in this game. And then they just kind of like, only 1 touchdown the second half. Pittsburgh, do your thing, whatever. Like, I can't believe we didn't hit any of these stupid alt escalators. To me, I think the takeaway for Baltimore is just that they can do this. And quite frankly, we'll come back to when we get to my hot read. I think Buffalo's defense, as a bit of an undersized unit and not great against power run, I think they might see a little more of this than you think coming up next week. And I think that Baltimore already showed they could do it that way, at least somewhat against them. What better way to keep possibly the MVP Josh Allen off the field than keeping possibly the MVP Lamar Jackson on the field with 10, 12, 14 play drives up and down the field. So I don't know that it's like, okay, here's Baltimore's formula for every game. But if you're going to play Josh Allen next and then Patrick Mahomes after that, the ability to do that and keep the opponent off the field is a pretty good ability and one that they didn't have because they didn't have Derrick Henry these last years. So I think to me, that's the thing. They can beat you when Lamar does crazy stuff, or they can beat you when Lamar is the decoy here. He, like, credit where it's due, on the one long Henry touchdown, Lamar is the reason Henry had the long touchdown because like 3 linebackers follow Lamar on the decoy and Henry's just gone up the middle. Like, that's both dudes. Both guys have to be as good as they are to get that play. So I'm finally there to give credit to both of the guys, but the ability to have them and be able to read the defense basically and make that decision. Who are you going to let us beat you with right now? Because we have two guys that can do it on any given game, any given play. So to me, from a Baltimore standpoint, that was the big takeaway.
Yeah, I think I probably agree. It's just if Flowers doesn't play, does it have the same impact against the Buffalo team? We'll talk about Buffalo Denver in a second, but their defense playing against Denver isn't the defense I think we're going to see against Baltimore. Denver just didn't put up the fight Baltimore obviously is going to put up. And in the games this year that Buffalo has faced better offenses, I mean, they've gotten torched. So I think it's something to consider next week is how much of an offense without the run game, like from a pass standpoint, we're going to see. Now, I think it's probably just worth 2 seconds on Pittsburgh. I mean, they just absolutely kind of get embarrassed here. I mean, I don't feel like at any point in this game we thought the upset was possible after the game had started because they started so slowly. And I put this out, but I think it's worth talking about in terms of a funeral for Pittsburgh here. 11-25 against a first half spread last 2 seasons. 25-46 first half ATS since 2021. Worst mark in the NFL of any team. So they are just not starting fast at all last 4 years or so. And then you talk the playoffs. 6 straight losses straight up and against the spread. Tomlin joins only Marvin Lewis, Marty Schottenheimer, and Jim Morris Sr. to ever lose 6 straight playoff games straight up and ATS. I mean, the list goes on here, and I just feel like I believe Pittsburgh and the Giants are the only 2 teams not to have a quarterback on their roster going into next year. And I think that should probably stay that way because I don't think either of these guys should be coming back. I mean, I think Fields showed something this year, but I think based off of how bad the playoffs have been, I think they need a reset.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you are newer-ish to football, hearing the names Marvin Lewis, Marty Schottenheimer, and Jim Mora should send a chill down your spine. Like, we talk about those dudes as like the greatest playoff losers of all time. Now, I think it's unfair because I think similar to Tomlin, those are guys whose teams overachieved getting to the playoffs and then weren't good enough when they got there. But at some point, each one of their teams had to be like, you know what, that's not going to cut it for us anymore. We got to actually try to win something that matters when we get there. Steelers have now trailed at the half in 5 straight playoff games. You're not going to win a lot of playoff games when you come out double digits down at the half. Pittsburgh last led a game anytime this season for even 1 second on December 8th against the Browns. So not at any point over the last 5 games. Now, as a Vikings fan, I feel a little bit of the Tomlin thing. Steelers fans are ready to be done. They're ready to move on from Tomlin. The Vikings for a long time had Danny Green. And I think Danny Green, kind of similar thing. Vikings would be 9-7 every year and get blown out in the playoffs every year. And I was like, all right, we got to get Danny Green out of here. Well, guess what? The Vikings got Danny Green out of here and then didn't make the playoffs or do anything useful or successful for like a big chunk of time. I don't know, man. It'd be great to win playoff games and win Super Bowls, but you don't have quarterbacks. Like, it's not Mike Tomlin's fault that he's been given a Russell Wilson and Charlie Batch and the corpse of Big Ben and Justin Fields. Like, I think Tomlin's a victim of his own success. I would personally, I think it's going to get there soon because there's no quarterback and the defense is getting old. I would let him go out the way that coaches go out, which is to finally finish under 500 some season, which he will eventually, and then move on after that. I don't know, man. This is a franchise that never, ever goes on from head coaches. What do they have, like 4 in 50 years or something crazy? I think that he's not going anywhere, and I think he shouldn't. I think that he's earned the right and then some to play this out, and they're going to keep doing the thing. It's kind of frustrating getting a wild card weekend, but hey, we're bettors. We can at least profit off of it.
Yeah, it's Steelers head coaches and Packers quarterbacks, the 2 things that never change. All right, let's keep going here. Denver and Buffalo. So we don't have to spend too much time here, but Buffalo wins the game 31-7 as a 7.5 point favorite on close. Total goes under 49. So it's just one of those games where we will forget how it started by Wednesday. But boy, for a second there, I thought we were going to have a little bit of fun. And it was, it was like 1 o'clock, 1:08, and, Bo Nix, 43 yards to Troy Franklin. He ends up having 62 pass yards on the first drive, which turns out was 43% of his pass yards for the entire game. Because Sure, and I don't even really want to paint it this way because Bo Nix didn't play terribly, but he ends up having one trip to the red zone. They're 3 of 12 on third down, fourth down. It just ends up not being enough when Josh Allen's like tossing bunnies out of his hat all over the place and 4th and 1 chucking it downfield for touchdowns. It just there seemed to be some magic on one side of the field, and then on the other side of the field for Denver, as soon as you heard Audric Estime was inactive, you were like, oh, well, what's going on here? And it just, they didn't find enough offense in this game at all. And I don't necessarily even think it was Buffalo's defense that did a whole bunch. But yeah, I mean, both teams had 8 drives. Buffalo had 72 plays. Denver had 42. It just felt like a completely different game here. But, 31 unanswered, 21-0 second half. I mean, is there anything you want to add here? I can give you one stat before we go, but we could talk about the AFC bracket after this.
Yeah, I mean, the only real drama was the 4th down play, Josh Allen kind of scrambling around and then hits Ty Johnson. And we had to see the replay. Was his foot up? Did he get the catch? That was just a great play. But if that doesn't hit, you're taking 7 points off the board. And I think it's still like, whatever it was, 14-7 or something like.
You're right.
The Broncos hung around here for a while. Definitely, as somebody that went all in on Bills escalator and hot read and everything Bills, definitely I can admit that first quarter. So I was like, man, the long Denver touchdown, Buffalo settling for field goals. It was not the way we wanted things to start. Buffalo, by scoreline, had the biggest win of the weekend. I did not think Buffalo had the most comfortable win of the weekend. Like, they got there late. The stat I had here, late down EPA per play. That's where the Bills won the game. The Bills were 0.95 EPA per play on late down. The Broncos were negative 0.63. So let me put that in perspective. Every time Denver and Buffalo ran a late down play 2 times, the Bills gained a field goal in the game. Like, that's what was happening, is every 2 times there was a 3rd or 4th down in the game, the Bills were up another field goal. And that's Josh Allen and that's Bo Nix. And credit to Nix. Nix played pretty well in this game, but Nix is not Josh Allen. I believe the Bills now are 15-3 ATS in the second half. They won the second half 21-0. So that continues to hit well. And yeah, Bills escalator to the moon. We got the 7.5, 15.5 plus 215, 23.5 plus 520. I thought we might get one more touchdown at the end, but I think we would have come up a point short on the minus 31.5 all the way there. Like, when you give up a bomb touchdown the first play of the game, basically, your escalators are in trouble. So we'll take what we can get. We didn't get the Baltimore one. We got the Buffalo one. I think it came out even in the end.
Yeah, you started down 7 and still hit a ring of an escalator. I mean, that doesn't happen often. To jump on that second half Josh Allen stat. So yeah, I mean, he's 15-2 this year because he didn't even play the second half of that New England game. Career, he's 74-44. So this has been a trend, and that's 74-44 second half ATS in his career. So, I mean, we'll see what happens next week, because on the other side, Lamar is usually very good in the first half. So we will see how that goes. The interesting thing before we move on to the AFC bracket, so Buffalo just tends to kind of blow teams out, and they've been doing it well this year. I don't think that really comes into play next week. This is their 5th home game where they won by 20 plus points, and they've won by 20 plus in 3 of their last 4 games. Next week, completely different animal, but they definitely did their job in this one. All right. AFC bracket. We've kind of been teasing this and talking about it throughout, but Houston, Kansas City right now line down to 8, 42.5. I'll let you go first. I had like 2 or 3 bullets here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of said what I thought about this one so far, that the Texans with the points is going to be staring at me in the face all week long. Like the matchup for Houston. It's not a team that I believe in, and the Chiefs have come on strong down the stretch here, but it's definitely going to be looking. I very much may fade the 1 seeds off the bye week. That's what the trends beg me to do in this round. And I already tweeted earlier, I don't want the Texans, but I might have to take them.
Yeah, so Houston and KC, just as a reminder, played less than a month ago. KC wins the game 27-19, closed about KC -3 at home. Now, this was coming off of Mahomes hurt his ankle the week before. Both teams were also on short rest. The other thing I thought that was interesting from the box score there, Tank Dell had a massive day, 6 of 98 and a touchdown. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily a coverage thing or if that's going to be missing from the lineup. And then you look in the first matchup, Mahomes, 10 yards or shorter. He was 17 of 22 for a touchdown. He was 7 of 7 on screens. So just an absolute magician in the backfield. I'm not, we always talk about Houston's pass rush. Well, in that situation, I mean, he was doing his job. So we will have to see it. On the other side of the ball, Stroud was 7 of 19 under pressure, under 6 yards per attempt against Kansas City in that spot. So that was definitely an Achilles heel. So we will see if KC can get to him in that game. Next one would be Baltimore and Buffalo. This is I just feel giddy. I couldn't like with the fact that Denver could have won that game and we weren't going to see this MVP matchup. We are just so fortunate because sometimes in sports the really good teams just lay an egg, and we're just. Yeah. I feel so great that this one is going to be one that we're going to see. So, line right now, Buffalo -1.5 up to right now at home against Baltimore. Total set at 51.5. What are your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the matchup. This is the bracket we thought we were getting in the AFC for the last month already, right? So I think we kind of know what we think about these matchups. And what I will say for now is this. I've been giving out Baltimore futures for a month for a reason now, knowing this was the matchup coming, knowing who I liked here, and I will add to it more in our hot read because I will be on Baltimore. That's my hot read for the week.
Yeah, I'll give you the same treatment here. So this is another matchup. So week 4, Baltimore won the game 35-10. Buffalo was on a little short rest in that game. Buffalo scores 3 points in the first half, punted on 4 of their first 5 drives. Baltimore ends up scoring a touchdown on their first 3 drives. This game was pretty much over before it started, and I think the reason you might like Baltimore here, the run game, which was 8 yards per carry in that game against Buffalo, and Baltimore in the red zone couldn't be more efficient. Was 4 of 4. I will say this. I looked this up before jumping on here. So since 2020, Buffalo is 27-5 straight up in revenge games. So basically, did you lose to the previous team? If yes, how'd you play in their next game? So that is at least a decent sign after getting blown out. But the thing that I'm on Baltimore too. I like Baltimore in the spot, but I'll give you one stat that I looked at. So Buffalo 24th in second level and 31st in open field against rushing. So if Derrick Henry even gets close to that mark, and even Lamar Jackson up the field, I think it's going to make them lose their minds in that game. So that is what we have there. Anything to add before we get to Monday Night Football?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Minnesota and the Rams. This game is being played in Arizona because of the wildfires. Minnesota is a 2.5 point favorite. Total is 47.5. So this was a rematch as well. Back in week 8, we saw Los Angeles beat the Vikings 30-20. It was also the last Vikings loss prior to facing the Lions on Sunday Night Football, which broke a 9-game win streak for Minnesota. I mean, the one trend that I feel like we keep having to discuss is Stafford not being able to hold a lead. So he is 0-5 second half ATS this season when leading at the half, and 2-15 second half ATS over the last 3 seasons in that spot. So if the Rams lead early, is there a door open for Minnesota? What is your feeling first on your best bets, and then we can talk about maybe some fun escalators?
Yeah, so I think one thing too, I obviously have to mention at the top, the game's not in Los Angeles. It gets moved to Arizona because of the fires. Praying, thinking of everyone out there. Obviously, a football game comes in distant second to anything like that. What does that do for this game? Because as a Vikings fan or possible better, I'm worried that the Vikings come off an emotional letdown spot. They thought they might be home watching this week. They lose to Detroit, and now they got to go on the road. Whereas the Rams are an emotional up spot. I think you want to show up and show your fans like that they didn't miss out on this, that you can like get the team going, get the win. Like we've seen teams do that again, like the Hurricane Katrina thing before the Saints got their run to the Super Bowl. Like to me, the emotion up versus emotion down spot is a worry as a Vikings fan. The other thing that I have my eye on too, I'm not positive that I trust Minnesota's defense in this game. And that is the identity. That's what Brian Flores is there to do. But the defense started the year number 1. for about half of the year. They've been good, but not number one since then. More like top 10 second half of the season. And in particular, Vikings defense against top 12 offense by DVOA. 7 games, 26.5 points per game allowed, 29 or more in over half of those games. And I think that makes sense because Brian Flores blitzes a lot. About 40% of the time, Brian Flores brings the heat. The Rams this season were top 4 by DVOA and EPA per play against the blitz. Matthew Stafford shredded this blitzing team when he played them the first game. If you separate quarterbacks, 32 teams, top and bottom, separate them right in half by EPA plus CPOE, Vikings defense against the bottom 16 quarterbacks this season, 13.7 points a game allowed, 21 or less all but once. Against the top 16 quarterbacks, 26.5 points a game allowed, almost double, 22 or more all but once. Now look, quarterbacks being better make you score more points. Not exactly a novel concept here, but I think that pressure can make the defense look really, really good against bad quarterbacks. Frankly, this is the case I made against Denver and why I thought Denver's defense was fraudulent and couldn't hold up to Josh Allen. And they didn't hold up to Josh Allen. They could not get off the field in that game. So to me, that's the worry here is, can this Brian Flores defense hold up? I had a bunch of trends in the game, but they all have to do with the road team or home team. And I don't really know if those trends count anymore now that there's like not officially a home team. A couple trends that still do pop here. We've talked about this a bunch. Debut quarterback versus an experienced quarterback. Now after the weekend, they went 1-1. Bo Nix takes the loss big. Jane Daniels gets the win on the road, but debut quarterbacks 20, 38, and 1 ATS since 2002. So not a great spot there. Playoff teams coming off a loss of 17 or more. So a 3-score loss, 2-11 ATS since 2010. Average margin of defeat is 16 points a game, all but 2 of those by double digits. So that's the Vikings here. That is not a great look. Here's where I'm at. I'm a Vikings fan. My heart's already invested. I don't need a side. I am the side in this game. I think that the Rams are the right side if I had to pick one, with the points getting near the field goal, especially the way the line moved after the game moved to Arizona. However, I can't bring myself to tell you to bet it. The Vikings have been a top 5 first quarter team offense and defense all season. The Rams are the worst first quarter off or defense in the season. Vikings first quarter looks like the right play, but I don't think I hit a first quarter bet the entire season. But if I want to bet the Rams, and I think the Vikings will be better early, maybe you wait and get them above a field goal. Maybe that's the angle. Here's the one angle that I will give you to sprinkle just a little bit. I almost feel like I need to take the jersey off to make this one. We've seen all weekend big margin of victory for whoever team wins until tonight. The teams are winning by like 14 points a game. I believe now it's something like 14 of the last 22 games this round by 14 or more points. So if I like the Rams as the value, you can click the quick sub link in the link here. Rams minus 12.5, 6-1 at FanDuel. It's crazy to think they'd win by that much, but these games are turning into blowouts, I think, because the team gets behind, they get crazy, they get desperate, they turn it over on downs inside their own possession, and suddenly the other team gets an easy touchdown, something like that. You're just going all out. You don't really care how much you lose by. So Rams minus 12.5 to just win comfortably. They won by 10 last time. It's not as crazy as it sounds. It's 6-1. I'm a trader. I got to take the purple jersey off. But if I had to play a side, I think an aggressive Rams play could be the right move.
Okay, so that link will be in the description. So if you guys like that bet from Brandon, you can click away there. You said a quote which I wrote down and won't forget, which is, "I don't need a side, I am the side." That needs to be on a t-shirt, there's no question. One thing I did look up, and then I'll give you a few bets that I like. So you had mentioned the 2-11 stat on the Vikings. I kind of found something similar. I was curious. So Vikings were a great offense all year. Week 18, absolute dud. So I was looking at, since 2003, teams to average 25 points per game or more, coming off a 14-point game or less the week before having to play in the wild card game. Just 2-9 against the spread, failing to cover the spread by 9.4 points per game. Last year, that was the Eagles and Dolphins, and they scored 16 points between them in those two games. So to me, not a great sign when you're just kind of limping into the playoffs. We saw it with the Steelers as well. So we will see what happens between Minnesota and the Rams tomorrow night. And the 3 props that I like, I'm on Tutu Atwell under 1.5 receptions. It's like minus 175. Week 18, Tutu saw pass snaps behind Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson. Now that's a week where you're sitting Puka and Cup and you're supposed to be seeing people, and he is third in pass snaps. Now week 17, he just saw 5 pass snaps. In week 16, 8. In week 15, 11. So he has been decreasing week to week. And to me, between Cup, Puka, DeMarcus, and they're showing Whittingham as well, and you have Parkinson and Higbee, there's just lots of options there. The other prop I like, Minnesota's kicker, Reichard, over 1.5 field goals. Opponents are just 28 and 56 in the red zone against the Rams this year, 50%, which is tied for 5th worst. I think the Rams can stop Minnesota's offense, especially maybe a sack or 2 on Darnold, which will force some field goals. Reichard's got 2+ field goals in 4 straight, and last 2 primetime games, he's kicked 3 field goals. And the Sean Kerner prop of the day, which I'm going to give out because I'm just trying to be tackles and assists, is Jared Verse under 4.5 tackles and assists, 2 or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games. It's like, let me see what I had here. Oh, to me, the most likely outcome is 4. So to me, it's going to be a sweaty one, but he's averaging like 3.9 on the year, and he only has 5 or more in 5 of 17 games. So I think Fisk is going to get some sacks. He's going to get the attention, and they'll double team Verse. So that is what I have there.
I hope for your sake that Tutu Atwell at least like plays a special team snap, like returns a kick or something, because like I would hate to see him be like a healthy scratch before the game. Like, you're so right that he's so far down the depth chart, he doesn't even get on the field somehow. So hopefully Tutu plays some special team snaps and then nothing else, and that will hit your bet for you. But
I think he's going to get 3 pass snaps. 3 pass snaps.
Beautiful. There you go. So I have one escalator here that probably won't be a super surprise. I'm away from these minus 170 unders. Build your bankroll that way, then blow it on the escalator. Give me Puka Nacua receiving yards. Vikings allowed the most fantasy points to receivers this year. They were allowed the second most or top 2 most receptions and yards to receivers. Here are some lines against the Vikings this season by guys that are very similar to Puka Nacua stylistically. Deebo Samuel, 8 for 110. Stephon Diggs, 10 for 94. Garrett Wilson, 13 101. Amon-Ra, 13 for 101, 6 for 77. Keenan Allen, 9 for 86 and 6 for 82. And then Puka, 7 for 106. These are all dudes chewing up the middle of the field, an area that the Vikings are weaker at compared to the rest of their very good defense. Minnesota allowed 94 yards or more to 11 receivers this year. So here's the Puka stat. Puka's played 11 games this year, but really 9, because 2 games he left early, played under half the snaps. Out of the 9 full games he played, he had 97 or more yards 7 of 9 games. He's basically putting up 100 yards routinely. He had 117 yards almost half of his games. So I'm taking the Puka escalator, not super all the way to the top, but I grabbed the over 88.5. I believe the line's like 91.5 now. By the way, this whole thing, the whole escalator, will be a quick slip link for you. This is all at DraftKings. If you want to just skip the 91.5 and go straight to 100 yards at plus 135, 120 yards plus 265. I'm going to stop the escalator there. He hasn't had huge lines. So I think we're just going to get one of these like 8 to 10 catches, 100 yards, 120 yards range. And I just think that on third down in the red zone, when Stafford has to make a play, I think we're going to see a lot of Puka in this game. It's another reason I'm a little concerned about the Vikings. So Puka receiving yards escalator, you can get the quick slip for DraftKings. Over 91.5, 100 yards, 120 yards.
And I didn't even look it up quick enough, but I hope Puka's actually done well in Arizona, because then he's used to the place and he's been there already. So he should know the stadium pretty well. All right, we're going to get to Brandon's hot read now. So we've talked about all these games. So what's your favorite bet of all the games next weekend now?
Yeah, I'm on Ravens. So I teased it earlier. Ravens plus 1.5, plus 2 if it's still out there. Just get the best plus number you can, because I don't think it's going to close at a plus number. I think the Ravens may close as favorites. So you kind of set up this game that they played earlier. Week 4, first Baltimore offensive play of the game. Derrick Henry goes 87 yards, house call. 35-10. They absolutely dominate. I think right now, Baltimore is better at almost everything. As good as Buffalo's offense has been all season, Baltimore is even better. They're the one offense I think that's been better. Baltimore is now better defensively. Buffalo's defense is pretty clearly the weakest unit in this game. By DVOA on the season, Baltimore is better running and passing, offense and defense. They're even better special teams. The one thing Baltimore is supposed to be kind of weak at, Buffalo's been even worse at. I like Baltimore's coaches better. If Baltimore does not win this game, the only path I can come up with is that Josh Allen took it to Lamar Jackson and was that much better than him. And we are going to have the Lamar Jackson, James Harden conversation if they don't win this game, because the rest of the team, everything around it, is Baltimore. And in particular, I think it's a very bad matchup stylistically for Buffalo. Baltimore in that game scored touchdown its first 3 drives. Buffalo is not great defending middle of the field, sort of by design. You can only cover so much. They leave that open, and particularly, they've struggled this year against big power rushing attacks. And this is it. This is the one that you can't struggle against. Henry had almost 200 yards last game, and the Bills also have been worse defensively early in games. So if Baltimore gets up ahead, that second half Allen stat may not be so helpful because Baltimore is so good at just front running like they did in this game this week. So I think it's a bad matchup for the Bills defense. If you look so far this season, before today, the Bills had only beaten 2 playoff teams. That was Chiefs Lions, so pretty good wins to have, but they gave up 63 points in those games. So this defense can be had. Frankly, I thought Denver moved the ball relatively well on Buffalo today until some of those late down plays. Baltimore, now 8 wins against playoff teams, every one of them by at least a touchdown. So you can bet that we'll be back on this one for the Friday podcast with some escalators, because I think that Baltimore has a chance to possibly really put this team away and show just how good they are. I think they're the better team. I think they're better in this matchup. So Ravens plus 1.5. Again, quick slip. You can get that one in the link as well and get that one into the app. I think that they will end up closing as favorites at the end of the week.
Yeah, something like minus 5.5 Baltimore would be fun, or something like that, to try to alt it a little bit. And it's interesting as well. Buffalo's favored in the first half. So even if it ties and you like Baltimore first half, you would cash your ticket. All right, so I'm with Brandon. I like Baltimore in that game, and I think we've talked about it for weeks in terms of buying futures, and we got the game we wanted, and I think we got the game that everybody wanted. So we cannot wait, as that is looks like it's going to be 6:30 on Sunday at the moment. All right, the finale, last game of the weekend. All right, that has been the Action Network podcast. We recapped all 5 games and previewed Monday Night Football between the Vikings and Rams. And we will be back next week to talk about the divisional round and all the great games. And obviously check out all the Best Bets episodes and everything we will bring you on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app all week before the divisional round. Well, enjoy Monday Night Football and see you guys soon.